Now, the issue of safety is of major concern in South Africa. The latest crime statistics are proof thereof. Despite a decrease in vehicle and motorcycle theft, common robbery and assault, murder as well as kidnapping seem to be on the rise. What does this mean for the people as they now live in fear? Well, a survey by Statistics South Africa reveals that most South Africans feel unsafe in their own neighbourhoods. Criminologist and lecturer from Stellenbosch University, Professor Guy Lamb, joins me now to discuss just this. Good afternoon, Professor, and thank you very much for your time. You know, this report has in fact confirmed citizens' reality. They are fearful. We're all fearful. Talk to me about some of the worrying revelations from this report.
Are we talking about the victims of crime report, or are we talking about the crime statistics?
We're talking about the crime statistics, but also just the fact that we have here victims that clearly feel unsafe.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we had two reports that were released this week. So we had the first one, which was Stats SA's Victims of Crime Survey, which we've been waiting for a bit of time. And they bring that out fairly regularly. It's usually about once a year. Sometimes it's delayed. Then we have the quarterly crime statistics. So the quarterly crime statistics that were released were for the period October to December. And that really sort of demonstrated some concerning trends. We've had bad news almost at every quarter as we've had the Minister and the National Police Commissioner releasing these statistics. I think the biggest concern is that the continued increase of the murder rate. Of course, we're seeing some sort of differences in that murder rate. Murder is the most reliable crime stat that we have because it's the crime that most people will report. Other categories of crime have low levels of reporting, which means it's not clear if it goes up, whether that means more crime has happened or does it mean more people are reporting it. If it goes down, we don't know whether it's just less reporting or crimes going down, but certainly murder is a very good indicator. And murder went up if we were to compare the quarter of last year to the previous year, so the quarter of October to December to the previous year, it went up by close to 9%. But if we look at the 5-year period, that's where it gets really worrying. So if that's been a 21% increase from 2017, 2018 up until 2020, 2021. So, I mean, sorry, 20 to last year. So over the sort of a 5-year period, over the same period of time, October to December, we've seen this quite significant and consistent increase of 21% over 5 years, which is massive. It's absolutely massive. And we're seeing a similar trend around attempted murder of 17% over that 5-year period. And if you look at carjacking, it's more than 30%. So there are some very worrying trends that are coming out here. And also, if we dig into that even deeper, we get into sort of the provincial stuff. And there's definitely some significant violent trends happening within KwaZulu-Natal, for example. And there was no conversation about KwaZulu-Natal at the briefing yesterday. But the murder rate in KwaZulu-Natal, which is a ratio per 100,000 people, has gone up from about 10 to 14 over a five-year period. And that is a massive jump. So, and that's, we're not sure exactly for the reasons, but there seem to be a variety of reasons that are driving that.
No, KwaZulu-Natal remains a very concerning problem there insofar as the murder rate is concerned. I want us to oscillate between the two and now move to the stats survey itself. Now, if you look at the survey there, it indicates that if we're talking about fearful citizens, it's mostly those in urban areas, but those in rural areas generally feel safer. What exactly would you say this can be attributed to?
Well, it's fairly consistent. The report that we've got out is fairly consistent with what we've seen in previous years, where those in urban areas generally feel more unsafe walking at night. There's usually a big difference between I feel safe walking during the day compared to I feel safe walking at night. So it's at night, it's consistently people feel much more unsafe. Obviously, in urban areas, there's a lot more people around. There's a street lighting issue. If you're living in a high crime area, you're going to feel very unsafe. There are more vehicles around. We're in a rural area, there are less people around, there are less vehicles around. As a result, there's less criminal offending. I mean, crime rates are much lower in rural areas. And because of that, people feel much safer. And also, your community is smaller and you generally know more people, the people that live in your community. So you have a sense of trust and connection. Where in cities, it's larger populations, there are people moving in and out of cities, so there are a lot of strangers around. And that, of course, contributes to the issue of feeling unsafe. So certainly that is the dynamic that we're seeing with that Victims of Crime survey.
Now, on that survey, it was quite interesting to establish that the house breakings are more common now, but nevertheless, they're not that much reported. Why is that? Is that perhaps a situation where there's just no belief in the system itself? There's just no trust there, where they just think, you know what, if this has occurred, I'm best to just go and claim from insurance, but I'm not necessarily going to place any reliance on the police solving this matter?
I mean, the issue is we have, that particular house burglary is really an issue linked to, number one, to insurance, that if you have an insurance policy and your house is burgled, that you will go and report to the police because you need a case number for insurance purposes in order to claim. When it comes to, many South Africans living in poorer circumstances who live within a high crime area in a township or an informal area that has very high levels of crime, they can't afford insurance or aren't going to take out insurance, or insurance companies won't give them insurance. And so the sense of around, it's the point that many households will kind of think, well, what's the point in reporting this, especially if they have low trust in the police and feel that the police aren't going to do anything about it, or if they're going to be disrespected when they go to the police station. So it's a sense, I think, in many areas where it's around, well, it's pointless reporting this because there's going to be no consequences, or the police aren't going to take me seriously, so I'm just going to waste time. I've had my stuff stolen and I'm going to waste time doing it. But I think an important dynamic about theft that happens in many high crime areas is often residents who have lost things of value and have a bit of resources often use non-state groups to get their stuff back. And this is quite common. You'll see sort of taxi drivers and taxi associations engaging in kind of vigilante acts to reclaim stolen goods from individuals that are known to have stolen this. And then this has been well documented. For example, in Khayelitsha, the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry into Policing did have very good data about this. Actually, residents would far rather go to taxi associations or sometimes neighborhood watchers who would then say that was this person who stole my stuff, and they would then go and get it back and charge a fee to get it back. And then, of course, there would be violence that would be meted out on the person who stole the stuff.
Are there any legitimate challenges for the force, if we're talking about police now, in resolving some of these cases where beyond the shortage of staff, but also just the difficulty around a burglary, where maybe most people might feel that, yes, I won't report because my neighbor's issue wasn't resolved. But if we had to, for a second, look at the challenges that they're faced with, could there be some legitimate challenges that lead to them not resolving some of these cases for community members?
I mean, the issue around burglary has to be around evidence. And it's about if you've got, for example, burglaries are happening in wealthy upmarket areas where there's good quality CCTV camera and there are witnesses and then there's sort of fingerprints that have been left. Then if you've got the evidence and you can link the evidence to a suspect, namely that you have their biometrics, on database, and then you can kind of arrest that person. But in the absence of that data, in the absence of that evidence, it's very difficult to arrest someone and secure a conviction. And I think that's the kind of problem in many areas. And I mean, throughout South Africa is there is just often insufficient evidence that can be used in court to secure a conviction. So the sense of around, kind of populations and residents losing faith in the police. And it was quite interesting in this Victims of Crime survey that they did not include people's perspectives and perceptions of the criminal justice system and the police, because previous Victims of Crime surveys, they'd done that. They said, how do you feel about the police and the courts? Do you trust them or don't trust them? Do you, sense that they're doing their job? And they didn't actually have that in the report, whether they asked the questions or not. But that's been a very interesting research findings in the past, because it's shown that people have quite low trust and faith in the courts and the police. And it was interesting that it was certainly left out in the survey.
How can police restore that trust, even with the limitations around resources, limitations that are inherent in the system itself when we talk about evidence gathering, as you say? How do they somehow, with all of those challenges, restore the trust? What are the low-lying fruits?
I mean, this is quite difficult because, I can understand the police are quite frustrated that they go out and they investigate lots and lots of crime. Often the communities don't cooperate with them, residents don't cooperate with them, so I can understand why it gets frustrating. I mean, the things the police can do is really get the basics right, and it's about to try and be as professional, courteous and respectful to community members as possible, try and be as helpful, try and be as efficient as possible, to report to calls for assistance as timelessly as possible. So it's really about being as professional within what is practical, because I think what we see in many communities where there's loss of faith in the police is that, the police are unprofessional, that they don't respond, they don't come when they're called. So it's a sense of trying to build relationships with community members and to build that sense of trust, and then also try and find ways in which to work with community members to solve problems. And I know that's really tough, but the bottom line comes down to if you treat residents with respect and you've seen to be around, try to make a difference, then you'll see residents working with you, trying to support you, trying to cooperate with you, report crime as they see you as a valuable community resource. Because I think in many areas, the police aren't seen as a community resource.